Hi, welcome to part 41 on the Lackawanna Cutoff. Roseville Tunnel, part 2. Hi, I'm Chuck Walsh, and we're here at the east portal of Roseville Tunnel, and I can hear drip, 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 but it's outside the tunnel. All the drip, drip, drip that we used to hear inside the tunnel is gone. The tunnel is dry inside. Now, how'd that happen? Well, it's taken over 2 years now with work on the lining of the tunnel, and you also can see some conduit which is going to be here for our communication system, and there's also ditch work that's been done here. But inside the tunnel, they've applied a liner, and they've also injected concrete or shotcrete into the crevices inside the tunnel, and the tunnel is dry. That's been the major focus of this particular project. In addition to getting rid of the rockfall potential, both in the cut east of the tunnel and Colby Cut west of the tunnel. In fact, Colby Cut used to have a rockfall mitigation system with a kind of primitive type of fencing, and it would set the railroad signals to red if rock hit it and stop the trains and so forth. But anyway, that was years ago. Now what they've done is eliminated that rockfall potential entirely. But inside the tunnel now, this tunnel looks completely different from the last time we were here down at this spot. In front of the tunnel, but we're going to go inside the tunnel for a little bit. Totally different. And appears to be working. I mean, really the big issue, in addition to the water, and we just had 2 inches of rain overnight, so if there's water going to be coming into the tunnel, it would be coming into the tunnel under these conditions. But the worst thing, worse than the rain, worse than the water, was ice. So the worst of it would be on the west end of the tunnel, the west portal, where ice would form. You get stalactites and stalagmites of ice. And these were major problems for the railroad. If a stalactite was hanging down, they actually went through the trouble of having either railroad cars that would be used to just come through, like on the front of they bring a locomotive and put a high coal car and have the coal car knock off the ice, because the ice could possibly go through the front end of the windshield of a locomotive very easily, especially if it's really thick. And the stalagmites, I'll call them, coming up through the tracks because of the water coming down and freezing, could derail a train. So ice was a very big problem. So they actually had a shantyman on the west end, and his job would be to, he'd look for rockfall, but also during the wintertime, particularly in the west end, because of where the worst of all that was, he'd have to go there with a pickaxe or something, somehow knock stuff down or chop it away down below on the track. All that's done with. The ice tunnel, as they used to refer to it as, is no more. And the west end, where they actually, I'm not sure exactly when this took place, but they actually put in a liner. All that didn't really work over a long period of time, but all that's been done away with, or it's been fixed. The tunnel is now dry, which that was really the main goal of this particular project, in addition to the rockfall mitigation. So we're going to show you some footage of what it was like being in the tunnel with the drip, drip, drip actually coming through the tunnel in the center of the tunnel. Quite a bit different now, but back then that was an ongoing problem throughout the year. But once again, much more of a problem during the winter time because of the potential for problems that would be caused by the ice. Well, as we move closer to the western portal, We've stopped here because we're going to give you a few moments of listening to water coming through the tunnel walls. Here we are in Roseville Tunnel, almost in the exact middle of the tunnel. You can see ice. Now, ice was a problem. It's a problem in many tunnels. It was a problem here. And talking about the shanty man, one of his jobs would have been to come in, probably with a pick or something, and to make sure that the ice was not causing a problem on the tracks. Over here, it's not really a big issue, but to actually have ice coming over the tracks could be a major issue depending on how much ice there was. It's cool in here, but it's not real cold. There are no bats. There's no Indiana bats or any other kind of bats that would hang out in here because it's an open-ended tunnel. If it were closed, that would be a different story. Then it would be a cave. So our next stop, we're going to move over to the western portal of the tunnel and describe what's going to happen over there, and also look at a section of the tunnel which has been lined years ago to presumably protect from any kind of cave-in from above. Here we are very close to the western portal of Roseville Tunnel. You can see here that there's a section that's been, I'll say added, but it's actually about 100-foot section where a concrete lining has been added, which is been deteriorating, but it presumably is an area where there must have been problems either with water, and we can see huge chunks of ice that are sitting down here, so that might be the issue that they actually were addressing, or maybe that there was an instability which they detected and wanted to shore up the ceiling of the tunnel in this spot. Whatever the case is, when they come through here and do the rehabilitation, this is one section they're most likely going to have to concentrate on, because there must be something above us that's causing this problem. But as you just heard, and we were just on the other side of the lining, that's where all that water is coming down. And even here you can hear it drip, 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 drip. So clearly a significant problem with water seepage coming into the tunnel. Here we are at the west portal of Roseville Tunnel. About 2 years ago, I took video and I walked across, I would say starting right about, well, it might even be further over here. Couldn't do that now because what I was walking on 2 years ago doesn't exist anymore. Okay, I'm going to walk the perimeter of what has been marked off as is going to be removed here at Roseville Tunnel. Starts right here, goes all the way down to basically almost probably down to the bottom of the floor by the tunnel. Goes to here. This is one corner, and I'm gonna walk along at basically where the tunnel, or the top of the tunnel, is going to cease to exist. All the way over here. So it's going to take about 21 feet off of the tunnel, at least from the very top. It angles over. I didn't measure it, but I'm going to guess a good 100 feet at least across, and then varying widths as we go along the top of the tunnel. But it will result in a net loss of 21 feet from the tunnel, which would bring the tunnel under 1,000 feet or at 1,000 feet, which would abrogate the need to put a ventilation shaft, which would potentially cause all sorts of problems, not the least of which would be the cost, but the potential for causing instability. That will be eliminated. That won't be necessary. So where I was just right now, in not too long, is not going to be there anymore. It will cease to exist. And this shelf up here basically is going to be the top of the tunnel for all intents and purposes. Are they going to put like a permanent fence or something there? Don't know yet, but I would not be surprised if that were the case. So here we are at Roseville Tunnel, waiting for construction to begin. If a tunnel is under 1,000 feet or under, it doesn't require a ventilation system. The tunnel, unfortunately, when it got abandoned, lost, I would imagine, the grandfathering of that particular requirement, because the tunnel, at different times, I've seen 1,040 feet, 1,024 feet, 1,021 feet, or 20 feet, or whatever. They took off 21 feet, and that's gone. That was blasted away. And what you see now is the finished product up here, Colby Cut, the west portal of Roseville Tunnel. And this piping here is for communications related type of activities, we'll call it. Up on the hill here above the tunnel, you see what everything goes into this one spot. Well, that spot is going to have a communications tower, and that's going to be erected here sometime over the next few months. Probably, I've been told, going well into 2025, at least the early part of 2025, and that'll be here. So that will provide cell service as well as communications for trains and such. And basically that would be the end of this phase of the project. The next phase, and we don't know exactly when that's going to begin, but the next phase would be doing the work on the drainage system, or the drainage ditches basically, through the tunnel and into Colby Cut, and actually even to the end of Colby Cut, where there's a stream that runs underneath, and basically they just need to channel everything so that when there's rain, that water is going to will manage to work its way off of the cutoff. Interestingly enough, overnight we had over 2 inches of rain, and looking down into Colby Cut, and we'll take a look in Roseville Tunnel, but looking down the Colby Cut, I don't see any water, which is interesting, because in the past it didn't take very much. In fact, there would be water there almost all the time. Granted, it has been dry, so that we have to factor that in. But the end result would be that it's going to be dry down there, and the right of way will remain dry. So that's it up on top. This has been a project that's been planned for a very long time, and it's great to see that we're nearing the point where it's almost done, at least at this phase. Granted, the tracks will come later and so forth, and Andover Station will be pretty much the final part, or the final phase of the project, but at least at this point we're seeing that we're almost to the point where we're wrapping up this part of the project. Okay, I'm standing where I would think that they're going to put the communications tower. There's a big hole here, and the piping seems to lead in that direction, so that would be my guess. Don't know how tall it's going to be, but given the trees and such, I imagine it's going to be, I don't know, probably at least 100 feet tall. I don't know. But this is part of the project, but to some extent is an extension of the project. I'm not sure if my sense is that the original project as it was scoped for Schiavone was really, that this was an add-on to some extent, the cell aspect of the project. But in any case, there was supposed to be some kind of communication system, so this is just a more elaborate version, shall we say, of that communication system. They've really cleared off this area and kind of, I'll say, excavated it down, because when we were here last, this was not flat like it is right now for the most part. I'm looking over Colby Cut, and I take it back. There actually is water down there, but once again, we did have like almost 2.5 inches of rain overnight from yesterday. But much of it is in the ditch. The next phase of the project would include finalizing the ditching and all that, and the grading of that, and so forth. So it's not a real sophisticated type of project. In other words, they did this in 1908, 9, 10, and 11. So you're not talking about anything that's wizardry, in terms of being able to do this. This is something that is, I'll say, not overly sophisticated in nature. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, this was supposed to have been, the tunnel was supposed to have been a large cut. And in fact, it was excavated down pretty much to the level where I'm standing now, and the sides of the cut were much taller behind me, east of here. The tunnel was decided upon officially in December of 1909. The project started in August of 1908, and when one of the sample bores showed an anticline, which is, I'm not a geologist, so forgive me, but essentially the layers that you find geologically underneath the ground, usually like this, get an anticline. What happens is that it's been pushed up, and you get an area where almost like a bulge, if you will, going up towards the surface. Anyway, this kind of basically freaked out the engineers, and when they pulled out some of the rock material, it was so decomposed or degraded that it was almost like you could scoop it up with your hand. They called it, like, it looked like Roquefort cheese, basically. So, to make a long story short, they went to President Truesdale, which you can just imagine after our discussion and throughout our previous part 6 about the tunnels on the old road, that the last thing they wanted to do is have a tunnel on the new road, or the cutoff. But President Truesdale did eventually consent, and by December of 1909, the construction on Roseville Tunnel began. And then the potential for rock slides, which has been mitigated with the clearing off of Colby Cut, as well as the fencing that has been put over, the netting, the metal netting, which now should basically bring the risk of any kind of rock fall to zero. So that's this project. We from above here, we're also going to take a look down below, which is very interesting as well, because that's where the action has been taking place, most of it, except for this part, which is really in some ways unrelated to the actual tunnel project, but it is, of course, part of the tunnel project. I'll say tangentially related to the tunnel project. Okay, so this is the inside of Roseville Tunnel. It's feels like concrete, even looks like concrete. Quite a bit different than what this tunnel looked like before this project began. There's also, I imagine this is hiding a drainage type of system here. And I also see up on the side here the lighting and the closed circuit TV system hasn't been installed yet, as far as I can tell. And the floor of the tunnel is quite a bit different. The last time we were here, there was still some ties, there was ballast, it was uneven, there was still even rock in some places kind of sticking out from underneath. And also, it was treacherous, quite frankly. You'd have to be very careful, if not be carrying a flashlight to be able to see where you're going and not tripping over. I've tripped over stuff in here a few times, but in any case, that's completely different now, and it looks good. It's not done, but it's not ready for trains yet, but that'll be coming at some point. New Jersey Transit does say, at least it's the last communication, late 2026. We'll see about that. So here we have what looks like communications type of piping that goes in through the wall of the tunnel here. There's also lighting that was part of the project. What I'll do at this point, we'll actually go back in time to 2017. I actually was on the opposite end of the tunnel, the west portal. I actually read all of the different parts of the scope of work of the project at that point. So let's go to that, and then we'll come back here and I'll talk a little bit more about what has happened here in the tunnel. This is right out of, well, not only Wikipedia, but the Wikipedia article is based on the actual contract. Let me read this. It's going to, the tunnel work will involve removal of loose rock, as we've seen in a lot of places, rock bolting to secure unstable rock blocks, which we saw, which has already been done way in the past on the eastern side of the tunnel. Repair to the existing concrete tunnel liner, which we just looked at, as a matter of fact. Installation of a membrane liner that will provide continuous tunnel waterproofing system. Well, you can see with all the drip, 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 that's definitely needed. Installation of a closed-circuit television camera, I wouldn't call it a network, but a system, one at each portal. Installation of lighted pedestrian path inside the tunnel. This will be so that workers can come through, not that we're going to have, hopefully, people on dirt bikes. The tunnel will extend, the path will extend a minimum of 50 feet beyond each portal. The radio system will have to be installed. That's so that when trains go through the tunnel, they will continue to have a signal. And the actual tunnel length will be reduced by a minimum of 15 feet, which we've talked about as well. Also includes railroad track bed and excavation, initial ballast placement and rock excavation and slope protection, stabilization of loose and potentially loose rock from both the west and east rock cut approaches to the tunnel. This slope protection shall address rockfall hazard protection, as we've seen up here, that's needed. Netting, vegetation and tree removal, get rid of all these trees. And that protection shall extend approximately 1,700 feet from the west portal, and then 200 feet from the east portal. And it will also include a section of track roadbed restoration beyond the west portal, including cutting, clearing, et cetera, trees and vegetative, going approximately 8,000 feet long from here. And it'll be, once that actual work begins, it'll be 2 years. Now, one last thing that needs to be done, and this is not a small thing, although the project isn't big, but it's been a source of issues, will be that of the replacement of culverts. Now, one culvert has come up is at Andover Station itself. That's not really been a problem. That'll be pretty straightforward. Andover Junction Brook there. But you go 500 feet up Andover Junction Brook, and you come to Hudson Farm, which has been a historically problematic thing. Fortunately, that looks like that's been resolved, and what will happen is that will be replaced as part of this whole project, even though that particular pipe or culvert, whatever you want to call it, is not, it's not part of the cutoff. In other words, it's upstream from where that particular stream runs under the cutoff. So that's basically the project as it is, or will be. The question is, though, what does this mean in a bigger sense? In other words, it's been 10 years, 10 long years since we've had any kind of construction activity on the cutoff. What does this mean? Well, it means quite a bit, because it means that New Jersey Transit is committed to doing this project, the Andover project. And if you look in the even bigger picture, with Amtrak proposing to run to Scranton, the pieces start to fall together in terms of having the two projects, if you will, in a sense, marry. Now, people have asked, oh, when is it going to be done? Well, this is a 2-year project. The tunnel and associated work is 2 years. But New Jersey Transit is saying 2026. Does that in any sense maybe comport with what Amtrak may be proposing behind the scenes? We don't know. But at this point, let's assume that there's going to be some kind of coordination, which would make sense.
Okay, here we are looking at Hudson Farm and the surrounding area, including the cutoff. Let's start with the cutoff, just to orient you. You can see Andover Station down below. That's a couple hundred feet west of where it's indicated here off of the frame. The cutoff goes east and then curves towards Roseville Tunnel, which is about a mile or so from where it goes off of the frame to the right. C.O. Johnson Park would be over there as well. Next is Roseville Road, which I didn't put a line on because there are enough lines on this photo already. But you can see where Roseville Road is and goes past Hudson Farm, and it curves sort of in the same way that the cutoff does and goes off into the same direction over there. Now, Hudson Farm itself, you can see a most important aspect of this is the Andover Junction Brook, which begins in the swampy area, which is marked swampy area up above there. And that's where the water for the stream accumulates and ends up going into the culvert or pipe by the barn. Now, the barn is gone today, but it in this 2022 shot, it was still there. So the culvert is the upstream pipe opening, and you can see where that stream is in white for a bit, and that's where it's underground through the farm, and then opens up to a regular open stream, and then it continues down to Andover Station and crosses under the cutoff where there is a new culvert that's been built there underneath the cutoff. But this pipe, which opens up maybe 500 feet above the cutoff, is really that. This was the whole bone of contention for this whole project, that the pipe was going to fail and such. I really want to do a separate video on this to cover all the different things, not just Hudson Farm, but there were other environmental issues and political issues and sabotage and so forth, people who were trying to stop the project not only just locally, but and I'll just leave it at this point that there were political entities who were working against us. And I'll just say that the transit village was one of the basically casualties of that sabotage. You can see this where the transit village might have been on the lower left in green. That did not happen. There's a story attached with that. I'd like to tell that too, but that is interconnected with all of this. And the 10 years of delays are all thrown into this. So it's not just a simple thing of replacing a pipe, and that was an issue that needed to be resolved before the cutoff project could go forward. Roseville Tunnel in particular, because actually the repair and removal of and replacement of the Hudson Farm pipe was tied into the Roseville Tunnel project because Schiavone was designated to do that work. But this altogether needs to be basically told as one story. But I'm basically giving you a Cliff Notes version of it right here to give you some idea, at least geographically, how this fits into the cutoff. But there's a lot more to it than just the geography, but there's the politics and such, which that story really needs to be told separately.
Okay, now the way I understand it, and this is not my area of expertise, but at least I'll give it a shot. The way I understand it, before they put this layer of shotcrete, and there's actually probably several layers, they actually injected the concrete, the shotcrete, into crevices, forced it into the different parts of the tunnel, and they actually had to, I guess, with almost like an ultrasound type of visualization, to figure out where everything was, and then covered it all over. But what was done behind this, there's channeling or piping that brings all the water, if there is water that's coming through from above us, because that's what happens when it rains. Water goes through rock. It does amazingly well, and then comes through. But what happens in the tunnel, back in the day, it would come through the tunnel, which is not good. Now what it does, it gets channeled, and then there's I guess, piping or something that's covered here, that because of the grade of the right-of-way, it'll be channeled. I don't know if it'll be channeled at some point from here, but I know the vast majority of it in the tunnel is going to go in that direction and into Colby Cut, and then from there to a stream that's, I'm not sure, at least a quarter mile west of the tunnel. In either way, the water gets out of here, and then we don't have a water problem in the tunnel, that was the goal of the whole project. In addition to the other things such as the rockfall mitigation and then lighting and all that, the electronic work. So this is Roseville Tunnel, which looks, as I keep saying, it looks quite a bit different, and that's the amazing part. When I told people back when we first came here in 2017 with the videos, yeah, you better get here pretty soon and take a look and come in here and take your photos or whatever, because it's not going to look like it did back in that day much longer. It took over 5 years to get to the point, and after that to the point where it actually didn't look like that anymore. But now we are here where it looks like a totally different tunnel than it used to, which, that's progress. We get a tunnel on the Lackawanna cutoff. Here's ice. There's a big piece of ice, and there's water coming through the tunnel, as we would expect. Tunnels are porous and are generally a problem in terms of railroading although they often are a necessity, but if they can be eliminated, that's usually desirable to do so. In this case, it wasn't an option. This is a historic corridor. The cutoff is a historic corridor. So there's a certain degree of preservation that has to take place along the line. There are certain limits. You can put in continuously welded rail. You don't necessarily have to use rail that was considered state-of-the-art in 1911 when the cutoff was built. So there are allowances in terms of what is considered historic preservation. However, in the case of the tunnel, the actual outside entrances of the tunnel are going to be preserved as they are, or at least they will look natural, although there will be, as I mentioned, there will be a certain amount of removal of material. Now, we're roughly in the center of the tunnel right now, and in the distance you can see the stalactites, the ice, and here's I wouldn't call it a stalagmite, but it's like a pile of ice. Now, this was a problem. It was known at the time when the cutoff was being run, depending on the wetness of the year and the amount, how cold it was. Ice could be a significant problem in the tunnel. But apparently it was particularly bad on the Colby Cut side of the cutoff, which is the western portal side, what we're coming up to now. And you can see that we're actually coming up to where they installed a concrete lining, presumably to somehow mitigate the problem with water and ice, if only perhaps to channel the water down to the sides of the tunnel, away from the tracks, and then that water would be channeled out of the tunnel through drainage ditches. And we're just coming up on the concrete. We have to be very careful here because we're just coming up on a big iceberg almost. And the ice is particularly bad. So here we are, and this is the beginning of the short section that is lined with concrete, and unfortunately that has failed because the water's coming through profusely. And so this will be a part of the tunnel that no doubt is going to require probably the most amount of attention. And here's a stalactite. My gosh, it must be close to 10 feet long. That's a guess. Maybe that's 8 feet, but still. And I wouldn't want to be under that when it fell. Careful there. Yes, we have ties that are still here. That's the eastbound, the old eastbound track. Now we're reaching we're almost to the portal, but we're now at the end of the concrete section. And actually, if we just very briefly look back, it has almost like an entranceway here where they've put in, I guess, maybe 100 or more feet, not much more than 100 feet of concrete lining. Now the amazing thing is, if it all works out, I'm going to talk about New Jersey Transit and what's been going on in terms of delays, but if everything works out, this may be the last time anyone's going to be getting, or the last time anyone's going to be getting winter photos with all these really quite spectacular stalactites here of ice, because presumably this is going to be all cordoned off and will be under construction for 2 years. Got a piece of a stalactite. Stalactites are in caves where you would see them hanging down. Stalagmites are those which actually form from the base up. I can't imagine getting hit by anything like this. Okay, we're now at Colby Cut. At one time, there was rock fall detectors that were here. They're remnants of that system. You can see the wiring, or actually a fencing. And here's one, probably maybe one of the few that are left, a pole which supported the rock slide detector, which would actually set the signals to red and prevent the train from coming through. Strangely enough, the south side, even though it looks almost identical to the north side, never had rock slide detection, or for some reason maybe it wasn't thought to be an issue, but this side definitely did, and it continued for quite a distance, as a matter of fact. And all of this is going to require some sort of protective type of meshing or fencing or some sort of way to protect from the similar problem that has happened in the past. As you can see, water is a big problem here. We can either go left or we can go right. I'm going to choose to go on to the rail right of way. The drainage ditch off to the left, that's going to have to be fixed. There's actually a place over here that where it's actually blocked. There was a landslide of some sort years ago, and that causes the water to back up. There's water over here as well, but these are basically gullies that have developed because of the ATVs. Now we'll just turn around and look back. Colby Cut, another rock slide, part of a rock slide detection system. Or, the small possibility that a rock slide might occur. I should have pointed out, it's too late now because we're on this side of the tunnel, but on the other side of the tunnel, they actually had, and I believe it was on the south side of the right-of-way, a short siding. That was not Roseville siding, but it was a siding just for the tunnel. And for a while they actually stored a car that the men could stand on and could work on the tunnel. And at some point that was torn out, but it was there for quite some time. Here you see the shed. Or the shanty, well, it's not a shanty. The original shanty, I believe, was made out of wood. We'll show a photo of that. Now you can see we're coming up on Roseville Road again. This is the new bridge. This bridge was replaced within the last year and opened within the last year. Actually, August, I believe, of 2017, to be exact. And replaced the original 1911 bridge. You can see the 2017 on the side of the bridge. The bridge is actually officially, I guess officially, it's considered to be C17. C's in Charlie 17 in Sussex County. And from here, well, you couldn't see it now, but when all this is cleared out, because these trees got to go, they have to be cleared out at least to a certain specification. There should be no problem seeing Roseville Tunnel from here. And we're still on a tangent piece of track, so this tangent or straight track, if you will, started all the way back at Lake Lackawanna and is still going. And as we get around the curve, we will have arrived at Andover Station stop. And now we're just at the far end of Colby Cut. Mr. Colby actually proposed the station, not Andover, where it will be, but a station somewhere around here. Don't know exactly where it would have been. Presumably it would have been on his property, so he could have collected a fee for it being on his property. And Colby actually didn't own all of Colby Cut, or what this whole cut. There were actually a couple of different owners, but for simplicity's sake, the entire cut has come to be known as Colby Cut, even though technically speaking there were other owners that had parts of the cut named after them, and you'd have to go back to old maps or look at the photos that were taken at the time and to be able to figure out what those owners were, who they were. But Colby is the most enduring, as it turns out. Maybe the alliterative Colby Cut is maybe why it stuck. Okay, one thing that is quite noticeable from this angle here at the east portal of Roseville Tunnel is that they have drilled into the rock, and you can see several dozen of these all over the place to stabilize the rock so that there's less chance of there being any kind of rock fall here. It doesn't look like it looks like there is some netting that's been put up as well, but they've done this in the past in different places. I've seen it in other places on the cutoff, not here in the past. Now it's here, but in the past, one of the cuts that is east of here, there's that kind of stabilization was done, I don't know, either by the Lackawanna or the Erie Lackawanna, so it goes back. But here, this is all new, so you can see it's brand new where they've stabilized the rock. And just for the sake of making sure that there's never going to be a problem here. They're looking at this. One thing you have to give New Jersey Transit credit for, sometimes you can say that they gold plate projects and they overdo it, but they're thinking in terms of the long run that this is never going to be a problem. And I think that's essentially what they've done here, is to make sure that this will be stable for our lifetime and our kids' lifetime and our grandchildren's lifetime and so forth, which is good. I mean, that's not going to be something we'll never have to deal with in the future. So that's the end of part 41 on the Lackawanna Cutoff. Hope you look forward to part 42 on the Lackawanna Cutoff.